halls. We do them all around the state. Generally, I do it in my capacity as state party chair, and then have local legislators or sometimes a local elected, like a mayor or something, join. But you get me as your representative, so it's kind of double duty. Peter Barno from the 20th is going to be here with me tonight. We're going to sort of do the data dump on what happened in the last session, talk about what's shaping up for this coming election cycle, and then just take questions from you about what you want to know about Olympia. To some degree, we can talk about DC, we can talk about statewide stuff, we can talk about initiatives, we can talk about anything more. I should say too, the other legislators in this area have good reasons they're not here. Joel McIntyre, of course, is on active duty over in Europe right now. Jeff Wilson is back east in Georgia on a trip that's part business, part pleasure. John Braun is out of state raising money for the state senate, so he's doing his job. And Ed Orca is tied up with his day job stuff. So they're all out there in the world working. And Joe Kent is out of town on a book tour, the book he wrote about his wife. He's doing a promotional book tour for that. So it is late spring, early summer. People are doing other things. We will continue to do these town halls. We have them scheduled out through November, and we will do another one here closer to election time, and you'll probably see a fuller implement of politicians at that one. But anyway, so the point of these town halls is to talk about what happened in the last legislative session, both good and bad, and then really talk about the election cycle, everything from the initiatives to the president to the governor on down that lies ahead. I'll go quick and then I'll hand the baton over to Peter. But the session that ended a couple of months ago in Olympia was the short session, January to March. It was really, I like our colleague Kelly Chambers out of Fiala said she's been in the legislature for 6 years. It was the first session that didn't suck, she said. And I don't think we can top that. We call it great, but it didn't suck. And a big reason it didn't is those 6 initiatives that we qualified last year. They really reshaped the political dynamic in Olympia during the legislative session in a good way. As you know by now, we had 6 initiatives that qualified. 2 were pure policy, restoring the police pursuits and the Parents' Bill of Rights. And then 4 of them were in different ways tax reforms. The no state income tax restatement, repeal cap and trade, repeal capital gains excise, and make opt-out the payroll tax that funds the so-called long-term care benefit that is not very long-term and isn't much of a care benefit and basically just stays. So those 6 qualified. The legislature was obligated to at least consider them. It considered and in fact passed into law 3 of the initiatives: restoring police pursuits, Parents' Bill of Rights, and the restatement that there's no state income tax. Those 3 passed through the legislature on a surprisingly bipartisan vote, all 3 of them. I mean, it wasn't unanimous, but it was pretty close to unanimous, which was great to see. Some of our colleagues who just weeks before had been saying, all cops are bastards and, the justice system is corrupt and all that stuff, suddenly they came to Jesus and they were like, we love the police. We've always loved the police. We want to restore the police pursuits. Anyway, and the same with the Parents' Bill of Rights. It was a great turnaround in the rhetoric and the votes. They ignored, and when I say they, it's primarily the Speaker of the House in Olympia, the woman Lori Jenkins out of Tacoma. She passed the 3, she ignored the other 3. So that's the repeal cap and trade, repeal capital gains, and opt-out of long-term care. Those the legislature ignored. They do not become law, and they're on the ballot, the general election ballot in November. So you'll get a chance to vote on those 3 in November. beyond just the policy points of the 6 initiatives, the fact they were there had a great impact on the legislature. The majority, including the Speaker, Jenkins, basically were playing defense the whole session. And they're not used to playing defense. So they're not really good at it. And it took them a lot of talking and thinking and focusing to try to figure out how to deal with the 6 initiatives. And that meant they weren't thinking of how to put forward other bad ideas they had. And so we were able to knock down a bunch of stuff. They had a crazy rent control proposal. We were able to knock that one down. I don't know, there was some others we played beyond. There was this crazy bill that would have effectively run small doctors' practices and hospitals out of business. Then we killed that one. We killed a bunch of bad bills because they were trying to figure out how to deal with the initiatives. So it was a good session in that regard. The 3 that are on the ballot this November are already kind of setting the frame for the political advertising, political focus here in Washington between now and November. The ones who are against the initiative, that means the ones who like cap and trade, who like the capital gains tax, and who like the long-term care scheme, have raised a bunch of money and they're starting to do publicity and they're saying how, the Republicans want to hurt little children and fluffy bunnies and all this horrible stuff about what Republicans want, and really ignoring the fact that these proposals, these tax reforms, are hugely bipartisan. As you've probably heard, when it comes to analyzing the people who signed the initiatives, the majority of the people who signed and supported them were not Republicans. It was about a 58-42 split. 42% were Republicans, 58% were Democrats or no party affiliation. So they're not Republican, they call them Republican initiatives, but the truth is they're bipartisan initiatives. And that's what makes them really scary to the left. So they will continue to sort of define the political frame going forward. And be aware, I don't know if we've got copies of the petitions here, but we've got a potential fourth initiative. They are here, yeah.
Yeah, it's here.
So we got a potential fourth initiative that would be on the ballot in November. And that one is the one that restores natural gas as an option. One of the bills that did get through the session was Inslee used up a bunch of chits and IOUs and political capital to push through a bill that even the Democrats didn't like that restricts natural gas in residences and businesses. And that's been, of course, an Inslee Greenie priority for years, get rid of natural gas. So the initiative restores natural gas. You can get it in your house, you can put it in a business. I mean, people like eating with it, people really like cooking with natural gas. So if you want natural gas, you can have natural gas. That's what we do. So that's what we look at going forward. We'll talk more about the mechanics of the races and stuff on the ballot in November, but I want to hand it over to Peter for a while to talk about the session.
Just to make sure, there's no tricks with these initiatives. When we get our ballots for the 3 initiatives, we are voting yes for the initiatives?
Yes.
Okay.
Vote yes, pay less.
Good. That's what I was looking at.
I have a quick question for you though. Initiatives we've done in the past, voted on, it seems like they go down the toilet, even if they pass. There's always some way the governor or whatever circumvents it. What's to stop that?
They're better written than some of those other initiatives. Some of the initiatives that have passed had language in them that we knew, or that people who follow this stuff knew was trouble when it started. The 6 that we put forward, we wrote pretty carefully to avoid troubling language. Remember, with initiatives, the old way that the courts have tossed out initiatives in the past is on the single subject rule. There's very strict law that an initiative has to address only a single point in the law. If you try to do too much with an initiative, it can get thrown out that it's trying to do multiple things. The other thing that has happened in getting initiatives that pass, tossed out, is these disputes about the title of the initiative. And the last $30 car tabs version that got tossed out was tossed out on this argument that the Attorney General made against his own title, that the title of the initiative was misleading. We got around that by doing, but we filed multiple versions of every initiative. And then the Attorney General's office, which is responsible for giving the title to initiatives, gives each of the variant initiatives a slightly different title, and then we run with the initiative that has the least confusing title. So we get around, I mean, that doesn't guarantee success in the courts, but it's an indicator, and the courts will have a harder time tossing it for these reasons. So we believe that this generation of initiatives will be harder for courts to toss out, but it's always a risk.
I think the caveat to that is the political side of this. If the Democrats get a supermajority in the legislature, your vote's not going to matter because they're going to have a supermajority in the legislature. It's not going to be the governor. Whoever you support, whoever gets elected, it's going to be the legislature running the show, and they're going to flip any of these votes on initiatives.
And how many seats are they away from getting that?
Well, they're 2 seats away.
Yep.
So I think the important thing that we need to think about as well is this impacts everything this election. The initiatives are going to be at the top of the ballot, but it's important that you think about and vote about and communicate with your neighbors, many of which may not be Republican. The fact that think about those elected officials who support those initiatives and whether they support the values we have and whether they support these initiatives and what they did in the legislature. Jim always does a really good job with a synopsis of the legislature. It's probably because he's done so many of these. This is only my second one with Jim, but I will add, this past session, there was good, there was bad, and there's really, really ugly. And Jim talked about the good and the bad. I'll just mention some of the really, really ugly. And the really, really ugly are the bills that got sponsorship, maybe passed the House but didn't become law, that next year are going to come back. And if the Democrats get what they want, it will come back. And in this entire session, in this entire political season, is really, to me, about 3 things. It's about economic security, right? It's about safety in your home and your ability to protect yourself. It's about crime, right? And the other is going to be about government accountability and transparency. It's hard to believe that if you're 57 years old in the state of Washington, you've never lived under a Republican government, you've never been able to vote and have a Republican governor. That's crazy to think about, because there's been Democrat governors for 40 years. And not just that, what to me is probably most impactful about this year is that not just that there's been Republican governors for 40 years they've been stuffing agencies and boards with their folks.
The appointees, unelected appointees.
And all those people are who are running Olympia and government, right? This election is about crime, it's about your household income and kitchen table issues, and it's about bringing balance back to Olympia and to the state of Washington. But let me get back to 2 bills that just blew my mind. That one passed the legislature, one got introduced, and had a number of Democrat sponsors. The first one that passed the legislature reduced sentences for gun, drug, and gang-related crimes around schools. And it's hard to believe that, but it's absolutely true. 1268 passed the legislature. I think 54 Democrats voted for this bill. And it's the second session in a row it passed. And what it says is if you commit a gun crime around a school, a protected zone, you're not going to serve consecutive sentences. You can serve them concurrently now. And not only that, it's retroactive. So if you did it 5 years ago and shot a gun around a school or committed a crime around a school, you can go back and have your sentence. You can go back for resentencing. And that's the reality of where Olympia is now. And if the Democrats get a supermajority, I can assure you that bill's coming back. Now, many of you have probably heard about the bill that I think a dozen Democrats signed on to that would allow serving prison sentences to serve on juries, vote, and hold public office. So, I remember posting this on social media, and there was a slew of responses that I was gaslighting, it was all a big lie. Until I actually sent the link to all of the bills. It's true, that's where we are right now. And those are bills that will be back. And if Democrats get a supermajority, there's no stopping it. You know, I've got an 11-year-old and a 12-year-old at home, soon to be 13. And I know that because of the eye rolling.
Oh, the trouble's just started.
I always say to her, I'm like, where are you looking? But so many of you have kids or grandkids, you know, that have businesses. And this is not about me. This is about my kids. This is about the next generation. And are they going to spend the next 40 years dealing with the same things we're dealing with, which is stacked government, no accountability, no transparency? Are they going to be dealing with things like cap and trade still? I mean, the idea that gas prices are as high as they are, go to Arizona, go to Oregon. I mean, all over. Gas price, you know, Democrats will be pumping out some mail pieces, and I can guarantee if you haven't seen them yet, because I'm already seeing them online, that this is oil companies gouging you. Well, they're not gouging you in Texas, they're not gouging you in Arizona, they're only gouging you in areas where there's a cap and trade system, and they're gouging you not just with the gas tax, but they're gouging you with overregulation and these types of programs like the CCA, and that's why we need to repeal it, right? That's so important, and that's not saying that we can't address climate change or carbon emissions. We can address all of those without CCA. For so long, we've been incentivizing change because you can make a smart business choice rather than punish people and punish them with probably the most regressive tax imaginable. A tax that not just impacts you at the gas pump, but impacts you at home on food prices, the price of goods and services. I mean, I can't tell you how many messages I get from families who are nurses and teachers, and they're like, you know how expensive it is to drive to work now? Or the trips that are getting curtailed because you can't go with your kids anymore because of how expensive gas prices are. I mean, it's pretty amazing how it impacts the people in our community who can least afford to pay these increases. And then Jim talked about the other initiative on capital gains. And I will just say this. You will see messaging on capital gains. And it'll say, if you repeal capital gains and vote yes on the initiative, so much money is going to go away and it's only taxing the rich. Just remember, the original proposal for capital gains was at $10,000, I believe.
Correct.
$10,000, which would impact almost all of us here at some point. And if you own a business, the $250,000 might impact you right now. But the problem with capital gains is that, one, if you didn't see this, it's because it wasn't in the press, sadly, no press releases were sent out on it. The Department of Revenue double booked that figure. And they made a mistake in calculating it. And over the next 5 years, capital gains is going to be more than $500 million less than they anticipated. And then the new
Peter was one of the people who discovered that overbooking too. He's being a little modest here. You were one of the people who discovered that error that had inflated estimates of what capital gains tax would bring in. So,
well,
cheers to you for finding it.
It's probably because when I looked at capital budget, I said, how come we don't have money? Where's the money? And so, and Department of Revenue kind of pretty much tried to bury it in their press conference. But not only that, but they clicked the wrong box and had gross, not net revenue when they actually calculated capital gains. Two things. So they did two things that really screwed it up, which resulted in about a $500 million mistake. And then the recent projections, it's down another 150 million, right? So not only that, but the problem with capital gains is I can assure you that they're going to lower that limit to impact almost all of us. And two, they underestimated taxpayer migration. I don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat. Look, don't do anything illegal, but your self-interest is to find ways to not just hand over your money, right? There's something called taxpayer migration, and we saw it amongst some of the very richest million and billionaire Democrats. They moved all their stuff to Florida and Texas and other states that didn't have capital gains tax. So they underestimated folks who would rather reinvest in their company, create jobs, rather than just hand it over to a government to go into a slush fund. I mean, that's huge. And then obviously long-term care. Long-term care payroll tax. I don't know how many of you are paying it. I'm gonna pay it, sadly, hopefully not. My kids are probably gonna pay more into it than they're ever gonna get out of it. And it's really a misnomer that it's long-term care. It's short-term care at best. 36,500 even adjusted. I have talked to long-term care facilities throughout my district, from Thurston County through Clark County. And nobody has told me $36,500 is a good deal, and that it's gonna have a huge impact. What it really is probably about is unions, because if you wanna take care of a family member, one thing they're not telling you is that if you want your, I don't know, your kids or grandkids to take care of you at some point, if you need it, they're gonna have to join the union to take care of you, because they're gonna have to go through the training. And the other thing is $36,500, especially if you're in a memory care or a facility, is gonna last you about 2 to 3 months, right? It's not portable, so you can't take it with you. And I think the biggest crime about this bill and this policy is that it completely ignores the fact that we live in a community property state. So if you have a stay-at-home spouse who doesn't contribute to the program, and you're paying into this program your whole life, and they need the services and you don't, they can't touch all that money they've been without their entire life. All that money just gets wasted. If you never need it, your spouse needs it. You can invest that same amount of money, and I'm not saying to do this, but because I do think long-term care planning is a good idea, just do it in a smart way that fits your family. But you can put that same amount of money in the stock market, and it'll be more flexible, and you can use it for a lot more things. This election is about choice. Capital gains tax takes away choice from families at the kitchen table, right? Capital gains tax takes away choices from businesses to reinvest. And the long-term care takes away choices on your health care and long-term care of your family members and yourself. This is about choice, and it's another reason why the government's taking the choice away from you and trying to dictate. And it's really the product of 40 years of Democratic government and 40 years of Democrats just filling agencies up with their folks, their employees. You've had over 20 years of Democrat control of the House. You've had a trifecta for I don't know how many years out of the last 2-3 generations.
10 years anyway, or out of the whole, yeah. We had the Senate for a little while. Yeah.
If you think, look, crime is bad. The economy's not good. And it's clear, I don't care, I talk to friends who are Democrats and independents, or say they're independents, they agree with us on these issues. The goal is, as elected officials, the goal is, as PCOs and as members of our party, is to communicate that. Don't stop at the top of the ticket. There's gonna be the initiatives are gonna be the first things you vote on. Be educated and help educate our neighbors how to vote throughout that entire ballot, and make sure they're voting for the people who represent their values and also support those issues. Because you may vote yes to repeal a cap and gains tax. You may vote yes, or a cap and trade, or capital gains, or long-term care. You may vote yes, but they may then vote for the same person who's gonna just reverse that vote once they get into the legislature. So that would be my message on how we can do a better job making sure we educate our neighbors about how important this election is, because it really is very important.
Yeah, there's no doubt that capital gains tax has got a bad effect. I mean, they don't, even Amazon doesn't like us talking about it, but Jeff Bezos left his state legally and moved to Florida because of this capital gains tax. And he's not the only one. I mean, some of you know Fisher Investments. They used to be run out of Camas down in Clark County. They moved their operation down to Austin, Texas, largely because of this tax policy. So companies are leaving, and we don't see a lot of tech industry stuff down here in this part of the state, but a lot of tech people, the tech workers who work for, the Microsofts, the Amazons, and all the smaller startups around them, they don't get paid a huge salary. They get paid a lot of their money comes from stock. They're given stock options instead of cash as their pay. And then when they sell the stock, which is the way that most of those people actually get ahead, that gets taxed under capital gains. And so all those tech workers will take a bigger hit now in taxes here in the state. And so Amazon and Microsoft are probably going to stick around, but a lot of these sub companies that work under those big giants, if they open up, across the river in Portland or one of the suburbs of Portland or over in, Post Falls, Idaho or something, they don't have to pay that tax. And it's very easy for them to do that, and then the state loses all the other financial activity related to those businesses. So it has a big effect. And I think when I talk to people about these tax reforms, it doesn't take much explaining. They know that we are taxed heavily in this state. They know that these initiatives are tax reforms that are going to cut taxes, and they're basically on board. And that's why the left is so twisted up about it, is all we have to do is tell the truth about these tax reforms. Look, we're cutting taxes where we can. I'd like to cut property taxes too, but that's a project for later. We're cutting the taxes where we can do it in the single subject limits of an initiative, quickly and effectively. And people are sold. They're like, yeah, okay, I think we should cut our taxes in this state. And the other side, and that's why they're doing all this expensive ads and marketing and stuff, is they basically have to spin it. All we have to do is tell the truth about what the initiatives do. They're the ones who have to create these fairy story narratives and basically lie about what the effect of the initiatives are in order to get opposition twisted up against them. So I am actually looking forward to the next few months, because I think it's going to be fun to tell the truth about good tax reform. All right, let's get to the questions. You go.
Hey, Jim, thanks for the good report, both of you guys. I don't know the answer to this, so that's why I think the Washington State Constitution, if it was interpreted fairly judiciously, would not allow that, right? I mean, I think we have more of a judge problem, and I don't think we think about that. I thought the Gators gun case really showed how important that we do have some good judges locally, I guess, in some situations.
No, Basher's opinion in Gators was a good, well-written opinion.
Yeah.
And Basher is not particularly conservative. He's just... Basher?
It's just that.
Yeah, but I mean, it was a good opinion. It was a good rule.
It was really, I guess, really well written and stuff, but I just think that's something to change society, we need to go after the judges, I think, too, during elections. But
okay, so we got help there.
We've got one.
We got one. We got one good judge candidate on ballot coming up. That's Dave Larson. He's running for the state Supreme Court. So, I mean, if you know this part, it's always tough, these judge elections, right? Because they're restricted by the Bar Association. It's not law. And actually, I should yield to Peter to talk about this, but it's not law, but it's their ethics canon that says they can't say very much when they're running for, we elect our judges, but they're not allowed to say very much when they're running. And that makes it hard to articulate a clear constitutional message, because they're restricted in what they can say. But, and Peter, you're a member of the bar. What do you think about judge elections?
Well, it's a good reminder, I should start thinking about what I say. No, I agree, and it's hard because they're not the sexiest of races, right? And a lot of times they get overlooked about their importance, but it's true. We need to do, I think, a better job, top to bottom, recruiting candidates and starting to look at that. It's also pretty hard, to give up a law practice or to give up your job to run for judge without some statewide recognition, because the money will come in. right? Because of how important it is. We start looking at trying to bring some of that balance back, it's tough. I mean, how many times have we talked about something like, well, Peter, why don't you run that? I'm happy we're on that. But it is important, and it is a legal and judicial and legislative issue. But, let's be clear, I mean, when the Supreme Court decides an interpretation of law, we, as a legislature, can also rewrite that law and write it the way we want to. So it's equally important that the legislature build up a majority and find more balance as well to offset that as well, as we also address the issue of the judicial rank.
Does the Washington State Constitution favor not these taxes? I mean, I'm a business owner.
The language in the Constitution is taxes have to be uniform on all similar classes of asset, and income has traditionally been defined as an asset in the state. So basically what this Constitution says, state Constitution says, is that taxes have to be flat. You can't have a different tax rate, graduated tax rate, like you do at the federal level with the income tax. So it is a misinterpretation that the Constitution says you can't have a state income tax. It doesn't say that. It just says if we had a state income tax, it would have to be flat. You couldn't have it graduated like the federal income tax is. Now, Initiative 2111 that passed the legislature and is going into law, June 6th, says no state income tax, regardless of graduated, flat, whatever, no state income tax. So that's not in the Constitution, that's in statute, that's in our RCW. But it clarifies confusion about tax.
Thank you.
All right, over here.
Is there a way that we can try to get our guns back? Like, how would we go about doing that?
You never should have given your guns up, is my answer.
Well, they banned them. I didn't even have the chance.
They did.
I get this question all the time, almost every day. Right now, I believe the best arena for reclaiming either Second Amendment or Article 1, Section 24 firearms rights is the courts, particularly the federal courts. And I just think that given the current makeup of the legislature in Olympia, and certainly given who we've had, the outgoing governor, the courts are our best bet to restore that. And as you probably know, if you care, the Ninth Circuit, the Federal Appeals Court Circuit for the West Coast, has issued a couple of good rulings overturning some bad law in other states. And our bad laws here, with regard to the so-called assault weapon ban, with regard to the so-called magazine ban, are in line to be considered by the Federal Appeals Court of the Ninth Circuit. I still think that's the best and fastest way to fix the problem. Now, I would love to be able to get some kind of legislative solution through Olympia, but the practical reality is right now that's not going to happen. And when we test gun rights issues as initiatives, they don't do very well. The people in the state they're not against restoring gun rights by initiative, but they're kind of ambivalent, they're kind of mixed about it. So the initiative avenue is not great for gun rights either. At the moment, the best play are lawsuits like the Gators Guns, which is currently in the state court system, but I think will eventually have to go to the federal court system. Or some of the cases being run by the Silent Majority Foundation, which are already in the federal system, and they're focused more on the so-called assault weapon ban. I think those are still our best bet to get satisfaction. But, I mean, look, the courts can say what they want, the Attorney General can say what he wants, the Governor can say what he wants. Article 1, Section 24 is crystal clear. Your right to keep and bear arms in defense of yourself and the community shall not be impaired. So the Constitution is our friend on this issue.
So on that topic, can we restore some of our gun rights that were taken from us with the governor election and the attorney general election, or are we past that?
No, it would be very hard. The guy who started the Silent Majority Foundation is running for state attorney general. So Pete Serrano, Pete Serrano for Attorney General. It is absolutely brilliant that the lawyer who is arguably the strongest gun rights lawyer in the state is running for Attorney General. If you care at all about gun rights, you want to do everything you do to get this guy elected Attorney General.
And Bob Ferguson's back. Bob Ferguson won, not 2-3.
No, versus 13.
Go ahead.
He's lucky.
Has anybody thought of, or whatever, on, they come after us on guns, the most kids killed in the school in history was due to a propane tank bomb, wasn't a gun. And if you go on the statistics that I read, the amount of killings by a gun, they don't differentiate in that survey whether it's under protection, protecting himself when somebody dies, or whatever. It's like 600 and some, but stabbings was like 2,500 people stabbed to death. And there was like almost 3,000 people killed with other people's feet, hands, choked, whatever. So the gun part ends up being quite minute compared to the rest as far as death goes.
The Boston Marathon?
Yeah, well, no, this was a school back in 32,
The schools.
yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, take it away. I mean, the hypocrisy here is the left runs on all this emotional stuff about save the children, and then talk about that bill again. Literally lightens the sentencing for people who commit firearm crimes on school campuses. I mean, you can't have it both ways, guys.
Right, and in a very bipartisan way, many Democrats voted on the restoration of firearm rights. I mean, we would, but they also voted on restoring gun rights to folks. The Democrat caucus is in quite a conundrum right now because we have a lot of those attacking the gun, but at the same time trying to lessen sentences for criminals and being soft on crime. I mean, it's really a misguided argument that they have right now. What we should be doing is something that you've heard Jim say, and probably me many, many times, is focus on people who shouldn't have guns. Focus on bad people committing crimes. Don't focus on the gun. And I just don't think at this time, and I would agree with you, the legislature is the place that we're going to see a lot of change. There's been a lot of great federal, I shouldn't say great, but a lot of
Pretty good.
reversal of kind of a lot of gun policy in the judicial system regarding the history and tradition argument that we've made, on civil rights and judiciary, at least in my time in the legislature. That's been very helpful, that I think is going to help a lot get rid of some of the bills that have passed the legislature. But, my message to folks when I talk about gun issues is we need to focus on criminals. We need to put criminals away, and we also need to make sure that people have the right to defend themselves and their families. I mean, a lot of my district in the 20th is rural. I mean, folks out in like Morton, for instance, or way out up White Pass, on Route 12, I mean, it takes you 45 minutes to get someone, if there's an intruder at your house, it's gonna take a long time to get a state trooper or a sheriff up there. And so, at the same time, we need to make sure that we need to allow people to defend their families during this crime crisis. And we need to punish criminals who are actually committing the crimes. That bill, that 1268, because I'll keep repeating it, because I think we should keep hammering every single Democrat that voted for this bill. But 1268 that passed last year, that reduces sentences for gun crimes around schools, around bus stops. I mean, is insane. And that bill's coming back if this legislature holds or if they get a supermajority.
I thought we had a law where if you committed a crime with a gun, you added 5 or so years to yours.
Well,
We do, but things like this bill, 1268, cuts away at it. It reduces the increase.
you're talking about a gun enhancement to a charge, right? If the gun's involved in a crime, there's gun enhancements. They've absolutely chipped away at those throughout the last 2-3 years. And in addition to that, and I think whenever we're talking about crime, I have to mention, and it's nice to really be partisan here, because I can be, because a lot of times I'm at meetings where I can't be. The fact of the matter is, choosing criminals over victims has been a theme of this legislature for a long time. Giving criminals the benefit of the doubt, reducing their sentences, allowing them to get out of jail early, not making them go through community custody programs to make sure they don't reoffend, but at the same time, waiving victim impact fees, waiving fees and penalties for criminals who avail themselves of the system. We've beaten the drum on this. If somebody's assaulted or raped or a crime victim, the criminal now doesn't even have to pay those fees and fines that are used for treatment and therapy and restitution.
For the victims. And restitution is the key. They're getting rid of restitution.
So, yeah, as a lawyer, I've done a lot of representation of like DV victims, and people who get hurt in these types of crimes. And it just blows my mind that the Democrats will sit here and choose the criminal over the victim and say, look, you're availing yourself to the system, you hurt this person, but you don't have to we're gonna reduce your sentence, and you know what, you don't have to pay your victim impact fees. Those fees go directly to help these people out, to recover, and we're waiving them. Again, post it online, and they'll say you're gaslighting and lying about it, but I'll send you the link to all the bills.
absolutely the truth.
Because I think it's gone so far in this state, and Olympia's gone so extreme, that even folks in the Democrat Party don't believe their own representatives and members of their party are actually doing this, and they are.
It's pure ideology. It's the belief that the justice system is unjust and racist and bad. And so criminals should not be punished because the system is institutionally wrong. It's pure limousine liberal, left-wing ideology. And it's the people who espouse it, they're not coming from Hilltop and Tacoma. They're not coming from rough neighborhoods. They live in gated communities in Queen Anne Hill and Bainbridge Island, and they buy in to ideology that makes them feel morally virtuous. I'm better than this horrible justice system.
Adam Schiff got showed the other day.
Well,
Okay, but talk
that's
about.
not quite over yet, but yes, it looks good.
Talk
Go ahead,
about-
Lisa.
Well, talk about with, Officer Gadd, and you're talking about, we're light on crime. The illegal immigrant who hit Officer Gadd up in Marysville, his bail was set at $1 million. They went and argued this just a couple of days ago, and they reset it down to $100,000. That
This is the illegal immigrant who killed the state trooper with a vehicle. It is shocking. I mean, it is, you talk about a miscarriage of justice, it is a miscarriage.
And that hits home to our community. We've experienced that. Though, if you commit the crime, you have to serve the time. And that's what is so frustrating. We know you guys are fighting as hard as you can up there, but it's exactly what you're talking about. That the left, in our left down here is the union left. They don't realize that the Democrats who they think they're voting for are not their union Democrats. These people that you guys are battling up in Olympia are so much further left. And our community does not get that because we're pretty blessed down here that we've got such great representatives who are fighting for us, and that we can't figure out how to make them understand.
Just
that-
remember the Bob, and I call him the Bob because I think he's really Bob left. The Bob supported these proclamations that were
Exactly.
passed creating a sanctuary city,
Yep,
or sanctuary
Sanctuary
state.
state.
Well, in Seattle sanctuary city too, but yeah, sanctuary state that said, we're not gonna cooperate with us in the federal government whenever this happens. Which is just wrong. I mean, because it goes beyond targeting someone for being just merely a illegal immigrant. When they're committing crimes, they're choosing the
drunk
criminal
in
over
the
the
side, he
victim.
hit a person on the
Yeah.
side of the road. Give me a break.
Well, and so we had the initiative that would have repealed sanctuary state status. We ended up not being able to go through with it for now, because the time, we can talk about this a little bit too, we had a very short window of time to get the newest group of initiatives qualified. And because the left use some legal tactics to burn up some of the time we had to pick one to try to get one additional one. And there was the most support for the natural gas restoration. So we still have the initiative language to repeal the Secretary of State. I'm just gonna hold it, we're gonna get through the current cycle, and then we'll file it again as an initiative for next year probably. So this issue is far from over.
I know.
Unless the next governor gets rid of the private secretary.
Could do it with a pen, that's
We may
right.
not have to.
Go ahead.
So I wanted to circle back kind of the opting out of the long-term care tax. I watched some of City Inside Out, I think you directed on it.
Yeah.
And, there's this lady, her name's Heather Weiner, and she runs this, don't repeal or don't allow people to have a choice to opt out. And she was so insulting to Brian Haywood and calling him like a mega millionaire in California or whatever. I don't see how that's trying to convince anybody to support the long-term care tax or be against opting out, so.
Yeah, it was an interesting interview. I got a lot of comments afterwards about her reaction, and I think the way she handled it. It was not very convincing, right? This is a tough sell for them, to say that this payroll tax is really gonna amount to some substantial benefit on the long-term care side of it. And I think Representative Macri was there as well. And it was interesting because rather than say, no, we need to keep it, she admitted that it was a broken system and that we had to fix it. There was a lot of fixes that we need to do in the upcoming session. If it's that broken of a system and they're that afraid that people are going to flee the system, that's what the whole show really was about. At some one point, I kind of threw my hands up and said, isn't it amazing we're talking about how bad of a system it is, that so many people want to leave it, why are we fighting to make it better or keep it?
So I actually discussed this with a couple of them running for the legislature, one the 24th, named Eric Pickens, who was saying, well, if people aren't paying into the program and are opting out, it's gonna go insolvent and people.
It's already going
But
inside.
That's the point, right?
I'm just saying, is it really a good program if people are just leaving? If you're afraid people won't be in it, then there's something wrong with the program. If you're afraid of giving people a choice of opting out.
It's a reflection of the Olympia attitude. They've been in power so long. They're like, we created this program, you want to be in it. And when people say we don't want to be in it, it's like, we need to find a way to force you in it.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, right? All of these initiatives in reality can be broken down to just choice. Whether it's financial freedom and choice, or freedom to make choices of your long-term care, all these boil down to two philosophies. One, if you don't like it, we're gonna force you into it, and we're not gonna give you a choice. And the other is, hey, you know better how to plan your care and what's best for your family. The money is better spent in your pocket. Let's educate you, because long-term care is not a bad thing. It just shouldn't be run by government in such a poor way.
It doesn't follow you out of state, which I brought up. Many people like myself, I don't know if I'm gonna retire. If the money's not even gonna go with me, how is that long-term?
Yeah, can you imagine investing $40,000-$50,000 into a system you're never gonna benefit from? Or, worse off, I think, is your spouse gets sick, and they were a stay-at-home spouse, and you wanna use all that money that you didn't bring home, right? You didn't bring this money home. It really is a community asset, and you can't do anything with it. And when you wanna take care of them, you gotta join a union to do it, and go through their training.
The best way, I don't want to get too far in the weeds on this long-term care deal. It's a rotten deal, it's already insolvent, it's a bad deal, everyone has a gut sense it's a bad deal. But it's not really designed to help people. What it is it's like a deductible against Medicaid. Normally if a person is indigent and they need long-term care, they can get on Apple Care, they can get on Medicaid, and they can get long-term care services on Medicaid. But you have to be indigent, you have to be broke, you can't have assets to qualify for that. And a lot of this is where families get very clever, they move assets out of grandma's estate, they make grandma look very poor, even if she's not. Then she qualifies for Apple Care for Medicaid.
Probably some estate planning lawyers do that, I don't know.
But they get her on Medicaid, and then Medicaid pays the nursing home fees. all that this scheme does is it moves $36,000 out of that system and into a new system paid for with a new tax taken out of your paycheck. The people who need long-term care, the memory care people where someone's in memory care for 10 or 12 or 20 years, they're still gonna end up on Medicaid, most likely.
Just 36,000 less.
But just 36,000 less that gets transferred over to this other account that gets paid for by everybody's deductions from their paychecks. So it's not to help people. The thing is designed to help AppleCare, to help Medicare. And when you tell that to people, that's when I think the light starts to go on and they say, oh, well, that's why it's such a rotten deal. Because it's not really meant to help your grandma have a good stay in a nursing home when she needs it. It's an accounting gimmick to move a chunk of the financial obligation out of Medicaid and into a new and separate bucket of money paid for with a new and separate tax. So, but people, like, the other thing I compare it to is the paid family leave. Another somewhat controversial benefit program run by the state of Washington. However, that one people like, and people generally support the paid family leave program. You could say that this long-term care is like that one, except it's not, it's worse, it's money losing for the government. But the great thing, the brilliant thing to me is people have an intuitive sense that the paid family leave program is basically good for people, and this long-term care program is basically not good for people. So I'm always encouraged when common sense people can figure out when a program is good and when it's not, and that's what we've got with this long-term care deal.
He's been holding his hand for a minute.
Yeah, sorry, this is somebody else's question, so not me just interjecting my own question, it's not a constituent. The premises were uncorrected, but somebody was asking, school districts had their budgets reallocated somewhat this last cycle, where teachers' pay went up apparently, and some of the support faculties, money allocated to them has gone down. And can you speak to that a bit, and how exactly that's impacted the education systems?
Well, I mean, there's a lot to unpack in that. Every school district is slightly different, so it's hard to generalize. But generally speaking, the additional money that school districts got from the so-called McClary fix of several years ago went primarily to teacher salaries. Now, I'm not going to make a judgment on that. That's up to every school board to decide how it used that money. But that arguably is not what that new money was intended to be used for. So that created some imbalances in school district budgets that are just now, several years later, 4 or 5 years later, beginning to really hurt. And that is resulting in some campuses being closed, some teachers being laid off, some of these hard decisions that are happening right now in school districts around the state. Generally speaking, the school districts in this area were slightly better about that stuff, so they have not been affected quite so badly. But you see in the news, Bellevue and Yakima and some of these other districts are really cutting substantially because they frankly mismanage some resources. There is likely to have to be another McClary type reform of how school districts are given these allocation monies from the state. And I think that will be an opportunity for improvement. A lot of conservatives don't want to see that, but I think it'll be a chance to actually fix some broken stuff and how we fund schools.
Well, and just remember, when we had the majority coalition in the Senate, when John Braun was Senate Majority Leader, right? You know, there was a much better fix to it when that majority coalition, when Democrats took over again, they flipped that again and allowed for locals to raise levies higher than before. So the state share was not as much as it was under that majority coalition plan. I think what we've seen since that is the disparity, whether we're talking about levies or bonds, because I think it really applies to both in this situation. The disparity between property-rich districts, like the Bellevues, and property-poor districts, like a lot of what's in the 19th and 20th, have gone further apart. So the quality of education, how their investments are really very different. The disparity is huge. And I think you're absolutely right. I think there needs to be that readdressment. If basic education is the paramount duty of the state, then the state should be really dealing with a greater share of this and investing in it. And we should be directing that money to the students for basic education. And I think there needs to be better controls over that.
You know, it is complicated, but the other factor we have to consider when we talk about the school funding is enrollments are declining. And when we have these debates in Olympia, some of our colleagues across the aisle talk about, like, denials of river and your Egypt type stuff. They deny that enrollments are down in schools, and it's like talking to a mad person. I mean, look at the numbers. Enrollment is declining in our public schools in the state. No, it's not. No, it's not. That's a Fox News
It
talking
hit
point.
Seattle, and now people are
It's
finally
like-
gonna listen.
It's bizarre. But the truth is, enrollment is down in this state. And when we structure our system for budgeting money to school districts based on enrollment, and enrollment is dropping, the money you get, school district, is going to be less. So, but you can't even have that conversation with fellow legislators who deny the problem and tell you it's a Fox News talking point that enrollment says, like, go look at Governor Inslee's Office of Financial Management report on enrollment and see that the numbers are going down.
Or just look at the testing results. I mean, it's not enrollment, but the quality is down. And I think the problem with education right now is, while the rest of, I guess, after COVID, a lot of us readjusted. There's Zoom, there's other options, we've made adjustments. Education really hasn't. And it's not recognized the fact that the world and kids are a little different, and it has to be.
Homeschooling is getting better.
Yeah.
And I mean, you think of it what you will, but the curricula resources available for homeschoolers, the tools available for homeschooling are getting better.
But that's why we have to continue the conversation about school choice, and we have to maintain local control with the school boards.
That is right.
Well, then maybe enrollment's down because Democrats want to lower the sentences for gun-related crimes around schools, right? I mean, but again, it's a talking point, but it's true. I mean, you've worked in schools, in school districts, you've been in it, you've been around. Walk into a middle school now. 5 years ago, I was not as afraid to walk into a school. Now I kind of am. I mean, it's a different world, and there's less control. There's less parents, less teachers, less
Well, and there's
supervision.
things that are getting passed down from the
OSPI,
left,
yeah.
from that's getting shifted to OSPI, they're funneling it through WASDA, the School Directors Association, and WASDA's throwing their hands up, because they're caught in the middle. But OSPI and the state, the Democrats are telling OSPI, the schools have to do X, Y, Z. They have to teach LGBTQ, civil rights, blah, blah, blah. History, you know. As a school board director who knows my community, who knows that it's pretty dang conservative up there in Toodle, in case you hadn't noticed, you know, why is somebody in Olympia telling me how I have to tell my teachers what to teach?
I mean, it's not even conservative. It's look, man, I want my kids to be able to read and write and do algebra and maybe a little calculus and understand chemistry and physics and biology. Forget this other stuff.
Exactly.
We need to focus on core learning. You know, one of the most remarkable conversations I've ever had with some of the IBEW electricians at the apprentice school they have down near the Portland airport. And they're talking about how they have to teach kids who come into the apprentice program what degrees are, so they can bend conduit pipe. Because they come out of high school not knowing what a 45-degree angle is. I mean, let's teach them what a 45-degree angle is, right?
Well, and, I mean, yeah, I'm not gonna say, but.
Well, and just for everyone, it's half an angle.
Still lost me.
That's right.
What are the chances of keeping light rail off of the new interstate bridge? I mean, we don't want to bring Portland gangbangers here to Kelso.
Getting better, I think, getting better and better. I think that argument, which was holding some political traction a couple years ago, I think that they're losing that argument. I think increasingly, some of it is just the cost. Putting the light rail on the new I-5 bridge makes that project a lot more expensive. And I think that's gonna be a huge issue in the congressional race, in the third congressional, because the current congresswoman is on the wrong side of that issue.
And on the wrong side of totally.
Yeah, absolutely. But specifically, she's moving away, I think, she's trying to move away from her earlier support to have the light rail on the bridge. I think she's realized that's a big loser and is trying to back away from that position. But your friend is inflation. Inflation is driving up the price tag of the new bridge so fast that they're gonna look for stuff to cut, and the rail is gonna be, I think, one of the first things that we cut. But we're on it. In fact, Peter and I drafted bills and budget amendments that address the bridge and kept the light rail off it and did other things. And we didn't even run it, we gave them to our colleagues who are from Clark County. Well, you're from Clark County.
Yes, I'm a Clark County.
With more of Clark County.
I can assure you that our Clark County delegation, which I am part of, we signed a letter and issued statements and releases opposing the tolling on that and trying to make sure we were very clear our expectations of that bridge. Obviously, the Democrats in the 49 supported tolling and the light rail across.
The tolling scheme they proposed for the new I-5 bridge is a disaster for Washington.
And it would actually impact the city itself because the tolls would be so far out, that actually would impact getting into the city. And that, we made it very clear on the House floor, one of our real oppositions of it is not just that we oppose the tolling, but the location of it's gonna impact business in the city of Vancouver as well, so.
It's a raw meeting. And the tolling is asymmetric. Washingtonians will end up paying more than Oregonians will for tolling the bridge. It's like, why would I sign that deal?
Well, if I'm going to Oregon for work, I'm already paying their taxes anyway.
Right. Now, it's a double triple taxation.
I have a two-pronged question. One is about the schools. I did some research and 8 of the 14 voting board members of the Washington State Board of Education, 7 are appointed by the governor, and the other ones are the city. So why can't we swap that? Only 5 of the voting members of the Board of Education are elected by our own local school boards. 7 of the 14 members are appointed by the governor. Why can't we change it? That's, to me, where seems the bottleneck is, and where all the freaking decisions are being made is right there in that bottleneck.
Well, how about we just get rid of it altogether?
Yeah. I would like
Now, and then my second question is a little bit off of that track, is why are the Democrats only 2 seats away from having a supermajority? The state is red except for right here. What can we do to change that, and why is this happening?
That's a tough question.
Aren't you glad you know me?
Yeah, it's population.
Yeah, I mean, are they?
Okay, some of it is population, but it's a very fair question. We have not been effective at talking about bread and butter, kitchen table, nuts and bolts issues in some swing districts in Indianapolis as we should be. And I think that is a problem we are rectifying. I think we're fixing that now. But I think for the last decade or so, we have not been as strong in talking to people about issues that affect their lives as we should be. And we have been too inside Olympia baseball in messaging and trying to split differences and triangulate and all this consultancy, rather than being straightforward about crime and taxes and, the cost of housing.
And rights. Rights.
Rights.
Well, sure, I mean,
Yeah.
that goes with, we've been better about that, but I'm talking about the true kitchen table stuff. that really, we've lost track of that, and we've talked too much about, trying to find ways to distance ourselves from Donald Trump. Well, I mean, that's not important to most people who are voting.
Right.
So I think we've failed in that regard, and we've lost some seats in suburban King County, Pierce County districts that we should have. And I'm hoping we will do better this year in maybe picking up a couple there.
You've got your work cut out for you, so.
But this, I mean, that's why it's taken this long to do this town hall here. We've been doing most of these town halls like in Issaquah, in Kent, and all those places.
Well, we're glad to have you.
But the other thing too is, when we talk about the supermajority, we can talk about running bad bills, we can talk about how they want to change the Constitution. The real problem, if they were to get a supermajority, is they could vote for borrowing on a party line. They could run bonds on a party line vote, they wouldn't need any Republican support, and they would probably go crazy with borrowing.
And we wouldn't have Jeff Bezos.
So,
Despite all, our state doesn't owe a lot of money. We're not like California, we're not like Illinois or New York, where the state government is deeply in debt. And we've been able to avoid that because our Constitution is strong about borrowing. It takes a supermajority to approve it. And we've managed to hang on to just enough votes in the legislature to not give the other guys that kind of power. So we've been able, I'm so proud of our state that we have not played the games with state pension money that California, Illinois, and New York have played, where they've stolen money out of state pension funds to do stupid stuff with it and lost it. But the Democrats in Olympia want to fund a state bank with public employee pension funds. And that would be disastrous. And as long as we prevent them from getting a supermajority, we can prevent the borrowing and the stupid use of money like that. But I really don't, we need to be wary of the supermajority, but I really am fairly confident we are going to pick up at least a few seats this cycle. It's good to remember the supermajority, know we're close to it, it's a danger, but I want to be a little more optimistic. I think we're going to sort of inch away from the brink point on that, and I think we're going to pick up a few seats.
Well,
yeah, I'm gonna keep things scary.
So you don't think that it has any, there is any kind of, any voter fraud going up in Seattle, you don't think you get that?
Well, I didn't say that.
They already said there is.
But I'm glad to have you at the helm, to take these up. I think you are a real asset at leading our party on the city.
I'm a true believer in the old saying, if it's not close, they can't cheat. One of the other tactical mistakes we've made politically is we've aimed for 51% in some races, and you can't aim for 51%. You've got to aim for 55%. Because if there is any monkey business, as I've said, you guys have heard me say before, I think the monkey business is worth like 3 points maybe. So we have to win beyond the reach of their monkey business.
A lot of that's going to be voter registration. I think one of the things that we need to keep going back to doing, which, we haven't done, I think, as effectively as Democrats, is identifying and registering Republican or Lean. We used to call it back in the day, when I was at the party, we used to call it elephant hunts. We used to go out on elephant hunts and find people who are likely Republicans, or not registered to vote, get them out to vote. If they are there, get in the tiers and make sure that they turn the ballot in, and really chase them down. I think we need to do more of that, and I think that's gonna be even more important with the, wonky, and there's a whole nother rabbit hole, but the lawsuit regarding the Voter Rights Act over in the 14th, 15th district out in the Acton area, which is the reason why the 20th district lost Thurston County and gained so much of Clark County, even more of Clark County. The impact.
When Peter was first elected, his district didn't have Clark County. He's got
Yeah,
Clark
just
County.
like barely now it's a huge part of my district, and after this weird gerrymandering by the court system, even more so. So I think getting back to the basics, and I think Jim mentioned this earlier, the nuts and bolts of campaigning and what we do as electeds and party have to get back to. I'm walking with my PCO in the next couple of weeks saying, we gotta start registering in my precinct. Let's set the example. Let's go find people registering to vote. and make sure they know how important this election is, because I think we can't start early enough.
Remember, a lifetime ago, Peter was the
I was the
director
ED of the state party.
of the state Republican Party.
Back in the old
long time ago.
days.
Well, I like your leadership too, I did.
So Peter knows the mechanics of winning campaigns from his days as the ED of the state party.
So,
Go ahead.
now, my question was, you got right into it with trying to get more people registered. It was like, what can we do in our local party to try to make it better, to be more effective, to get more votes for the statewide electeds? And I guess you pointed out, going on an elephant hunt.
In your precinct.
Yeah. And
Use the petitions, use the natural gas initiative as the opener, as the excuse to talk to people, and then ask them if they're registered.
And if they're not, make sure when you bring that petition around, have a stack of voter registrations ready to go. Make sure they register to vote right there and sign that petition, make sure they register.
Because to sign the petition, they have to be a registered voter. But it's just a good conversation over.
So we're not in both of those pieces.
DCO should be going door to door in their precinct.
With
I've already
the petitions.
registered like 4 people to vote this election cycle just by talking to the people in my precinct.
If people forget they move, look, I mean, now you can pre-register to vote because of that.
And also, people, in other parts of the state, people feel like their vote doesn't count. I think one of the things we have that's good in this part of the state is, I think people know their votes count here. Because if their votes didn't count, we wouldn't have had the turnaround we've had in this part of the state. Perfect.
All right, we're talking about monkey business and funds. Right before Inslee came back and decided our draft was failed local presidential one. The missing funds from the unemployment.
Yeah.
Nigeria.
Anybody find that from the Nigerian prince yet, or did any legislation to prevent that nonsense from happening again?
They got some of it back. The last estimate was they lost 400 million. They clawed some of it back. They did get some of it back. We had a bill that would have made it harder for that to happen again. Remember, part of that problem with this is the unemployment program during COVID. They relaxed the security features on applying for unemployment. That led to a bunch of fraudulent applications for unemployment that they paid kind of stupidly. So we did have a bill that would have not allowed them by bureaucratic decision to lower the security thresholds on the process. That bill did not get passed. But we know what we need to do. And there is no doubt too, and this gets back to what Peter was talking about, this is the result of 40 years of Democrat governors. Is the woman who was running the unemployment insurance agency for the state was a complete political hack. She had no executive experience at all. She was a big shot bundler for Inslee, that means fundraiser, bundling contributions for Inslee, and was given that job as payroll, I mean, basically payroll. I mean, it was.
She got a promotion though.
Right.
She's with the Biden.
She went to the Biden, they fired her though, she did, she's back home again.
That's right.
So, there's a lot to fix there. And again, this is what's so frustrating about being a common sense conservative in Olympia. It's like the kid in the candy store. We know how to fix that problem. We just can't get the bill passed. And the idea that they turned off the cybersecurity measures in order to make it easier to apply for unemployment in a way that was so dumb, a bunch of hackers from Lagos, Nigeria were able to make claims. I don't say this a lot, somebody needed to go to jail for doing that. And it was this woman who was running it, Levine was her name. Instead of going to work for Biden, she should have gone to Purdy Women's Prison.
And it's unfortunate that people don't talk about that. I'm glad you brought it up, because it's really, sadly, it's in the rearview mirror for so many. But when you think about our issues with schools, like I can build a dozen brand new schools with that money, or more probably than that. Think about how that would impact so many in the community, or think about $400 million reinvested back in communities for sewer systems, economic development, the things that we need.
That bridge.
I mean,
A bridge.
a bridge with no tolls. Yeah, no, I mean, I think a lot of times when you're dealing with billions and billions of dollars, and a majority who tries to brush it under the rug, we forget it. But the reality is 400 million is what we got back, right? I mean, there's so much more that was lost, or I should say lost, given away. That could change, it could have changed lives for, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Washingtonians, but they just gave it away to
For the better,
next.
right?
Yeah.
This type of stuff needs to be brought up, for accountability.
Well, I mean, Peter was talking about it, it's transparency and, they're trying to get rid of the so-called Sunshine Committee, which is the Transparency Policy Committee or whatever. The current majority wants to get rid of that committee.
Which right now, when the AG is kind of the head of that committee, probably, I have a bill that would change that makeup and revamp it, but yeah, I mean, when you think about the AG is kind of in charge of that committee of transparency.
A fox in charge of the hen house.
And he's had his own violations over that.
No kidding, you guys. All right, we're getting close to 8:30, but let's do a few more. Go ahead.
Us, hopefully should be quick. I know we hear a lot about like the people in Olympia, the people on the left, the Democrats in the aisle. It does seem like there's a real divide, but at least in our districts, a lot of us are really unified on the big picture stuff. Are there districts in Washington that are sending delegations that are on the other side of that? Is there a part of Washington that's the other side of the coin here?
Sure.
Can I say something? Working on the panel.
Go ahead.
I was one of your delegates that went to the Washington State Convention, and I served on the panel, our state platform. And the answer is yes. We do have some problems. I had some problems on that panel. But we have seasoned people on there that are quite intelligent, clever, and masters of the written language who could go ahead. I heard groaning going on by the seasoned veterans. They would go ahead and let this nonsense go on a little bit about deleting things that had no right to be deleted, but then they come back again and ask to revisit it and put a complete sentence that would reinstate what was deleted. It was beautiful. It was masterful. You're in good hands. This man is a great leader.
Is that it?
No.
All right, so refine your question. What-
So in Olympia, when you're trying to get some of these initiatives passed, obviously there's hundreds of people collectively that are involved in this process. Where are the delegations coming from that are so in opposition to these things? Or the ones that are trying to champion some of these bad bills? I mean, clearly they're not coming from here, you guys are our reps. So where are they coming from?
What are the like the Democratic?
Yeah, like what's their breakdown districts?
Olympia, Vancouver,
Okay.
Seattle, I would say even further north, and then Spokane. Yeah.
It's the I-5 corridor
Spokane.
from Olympia north, and then downtown Spokane.
And then going around Bremerton.
But if we could, even knowing you're not gonna probably win back, well, I shouldn't say probably, even though you know you're not gonna win back the downtown Seattle folks, where we need to do a better job and really communicate several, it was the federal ways and the top roads, the Kents. We need to start with the Bellevues and the Bothels, the folks who really, are voting against their self-interest, just don't know it. They're voting for candidate attachment. Oh, I know them, they're great, I see them at the coffee shop all the time. But have no idea that the person's totally voting against their business and their kids and their education and all of it, right? Because they're campaigning on the smile and hanging out, but the substance behind it's just not. And I think we're doing a better job with getting candidates out there and messaging it. I think I mentioned it earlier, but to me, that's where I want to get started is really the suburban crescent around Seattle. I think we do a better job.
That's the right answer. It's don't think about the ones that are ideologically hard. Think about the ones that are voting that way but are persuadable. That's how we change Olympia, and it's the same for DC. I mean, it sounds cynical, but I don't want it to. Some places you just can't reach. And you can spend a bunch of time and money and passion and heartache trying to persuade them, and it doesn't go anywhere. Let's not do that. Let's use our time and our energy and our heart in places where people will listen. So the more important question isn't, what are the hard-driven, bad policy people? The right question is, who's persuadable? And that's where it's the 5th legislative district, the 10th legislative district. I mean, I can tell you the places, and it's kind of what Peter said. It's like Ithaca and Kent and Auburn and some parts of kind of Bremerton, Gig Harbor are a little fuzzy. They ought to be with us. These are the places where I think we should focus our energy, because that's where we can change hearts and minds. And we're not going to fix Bainbridge Island. Those people they've made it, they have a ton of money, they can afford to be worried about the Ukraine. I want to talk to people who can't afford to be talking about the Ukraine and are worried about car insurance. That's where we can change hearts and minds.
South Washington has a disaster with our I-5 corridor. The freeway is falling apart. Who is going to help us, Clark, Calais, Lewis County, to repair the freeway down here that is almost becoming impassable? And I'm a resident of Oregon also. And there's a hell of a lot less people in Oregon than there is in Washington, especially eastern Oregon. And they don't have that kind of problem. The road has problems, but they directly work it with state people, not a lot just contractors. And that whole policy thing sucks down here.
New governor, the governor appoints the head of the Washington State Department of Transportation. That is not an elected position, that is appointed by the governor. A new governor. The current secretary of the Washington State Department of Transportation's top priority is diversity, equity, and inclusion. His top priority ought to be well-maintained roads, bridges, and ferries, but it's not. And if you go to their website, you see his first priority is staffing. So we just need to clean house.
But there's gotta be federal standards and state standards that those non-elected officials have to toe to. And I view that the legislature is the governing authority that works with the feds to make sure those standards are met.
I think the other thing too is that the way the transportation budget is funded is a huge problem. And the more EVs on the road that are not contributing, or using the roads and not contributing to that fund is really hurting the maintenance. Now, I'm not saying that position is wrong with Jim saying, I totally agree that the priorities are totally messed up. But also, we need to start looking at why we're spending $150 million in the current budget on EV charging stations rather than filling potholes and making sure bridges aren't dilapidated, right? I mean, there's the other issues that our priorities need to be back to basics. The meat and potatoes that Jim talked about earlier is like, let's get back to what people really care about. You know, when I'm driving down the road and I'm hitting bumps and stuff, these are things that ruin your car, things that really ruin your day. I mean, there's quality of life issues that are going on right now, and safety issues that are going on. And the state of Washington, especially WASDOT, is not prioritizing things that matter most to us, which is that I-5 corridor.
Well, I've actually worked on projects with the Department of Transportation and also worked with the people down here that are supposed to be managing them. Yeah. And there's a clear difference between Puget Sound and down here.
Well, I mean, how many tens or $100 million on a brand new electric ferry, right?
not even building the boats, just studying.
Just studying, I mean,
Tens of
it's huge, and not saying ferries aren't important up there, they are, I mean, I think it's the second biggest, ferry transportation system next to Japan, I mean, it's important. But, I mean, there are dire needs and safety needs right down here when we're talking about bridges and roads that the current administration is absolutely ignoring.
And some of this is a manufactured crisis. They want the roads to be in disrepair, they want the bridges to be in disrepair, so there can be a continuing crisis. When we talk about 2117, the initiative that will return or repeal cap and trade, they're already saying, if you vote yes to repeal cap and trade, roads and bridges will be cut, the budgets will be cut. That's a complete lie. The Climate Commitment Act funds no part of road and bridge maintenance. But this is, again, some of it is old school Chicago-style politics. Let the roads and bridges get run down, and then say we need more taxes to maintain.
They don't want us to draft.
Yeah. All right, one last question. Who's gonna be the last? Go ahead, you got it.
Back to the schools for the point. When you guys come up bills or whatever that affects the schools, like my daughter is in the process of quitting the school, because she's an assistant. She has been beat up twice, but she can't do anything to protect herself. The legislation that comes down is telling them what they can and cannot do. So she feels, and I do too, those that pass those things need to get their butt down there and watch what's happening. So they know what their bill has done to a lot of teachers. My daughter is an assistant, so she helps the kids with the teachers, but there's several kids there that have anger issues, behavior issues. She can't do anything about it. They go up there and they just beat the crap out of her. She's had to go to the nurse and go to the doctor several times.
That, and that is a real story. I know my wife's a teacher, and she's gotten punched in the face. And while there is bad legislation that gets passed, a lot of that is from OSPI and how they write rules and agency rules and put so much pressure on districts to not report incidents because it counts against them in truancy, and behavioral issues, and referrals to law enforcement. So a lot of school districts aren't reporting them because of the pressure coming down from OSPI and ESPs. So yes, I think the mix of bad legislation and a mix of OSPI kind of being part of the bureaucratic machine with no accountability and no real idea what's going on in the classroom. Because I know teachers are really upset by the lack of support they're getting from OSPI.
Let me tell you, one of the fastest growing quiet pockets of support we have as conservatives is classroom teachers. They are, when I was first elected in 2016, the secret thing we got down here was the longshoremen and the pulp and paper workers quietly supported conservatives, even though the official apparatus of their unions did not. That's happening with teachers right now. Teachers are starting to vote Republican, despite what their union says, because they know how bad it is in the classroom.
And we have a good candidate for OSBI.
We do. There's a good candidate to be the elected school superintendent at the state level, a fellow named David Olson. And he is a school board member. He's been there, he knows how to improve things. But I guess I'll end on this note. Sometimes it has to get that bad before people start to wake up and realize the system isn't working. That's fine. But if you extend her experience across the whole state, all the teachers, what you see is teachers are starting to say, I can't support these left-wing candidates, I can't support it. We want to get back to where we can spank a bad kid or put the kid out in the hallway instead of emptying the whole classroom. All right, well, Peter, I'll give you the last word.
I think that was good.
All right, thanks, everybody. We will do another one of these here later in the cycle in fall, probably in September or early October. So there'll be more to say when we do that. Thanks for being here.